Welcome back to .NET Rocks. This is Carl Franklin.
And this is Richard Campbell.
And going to build very soon.
Very soon.
Very soon.
Like one more week or so.
That was a great show that we did on Tuesday with Rocky about Blazor. Yeah. And I'm really, really, really looking forward to talking to Frank about Ooui. But first, we have this little thing we need to take care of called Better Know a Framework.
Awesome. All right, man. What do you got?
Well, this being show 1540, if you go to 1540.pwop.me, that's M-E, you will see a project on GitHub called Entity Framework Plus.
What?
Now, so this is a bunch of enhancements to performance and enhancements to the Entity Framework must-have features in it, but it's based on the Entity Framework Extensions Library. But check out this feature list. You got batch operations, batch delete, batch update, link. You've got query cache, deferred, DB set filter, future, include filter, and include optimize. Those are all query options. And then you have these auditing features that allow you to track changes, exclude, include entity or property, and autosave audit entries in the database. So
that's really interesting.
You can also use bulk operations, which comes from the Entity Framework Extensions Library, like bulk save changes, bulk insert, bulk update, bulk delete, bulk merge. All these great things that you wish you had that you're usually writing code for.
Yeah, I mean, it's an interesting. If you're kind of code first in an entity framework, you're just like store my data,
right?
But to take the responsibility on where you put data and the other tasks around data for the typical app, it's interesting that they put those in.
Yep.
There's a philosophical discussion here that I don't think we need to have.
Yeah, I think you're right. It is a cool project, and if you're interested, go check it out.
Nice one, dude.
Yep. So who's talking to us today, my friend?
Grabbed a comment off of show 1537. So just a three shows ago, where we talked to one Laurent Bugnon about Xamarin, and he mentioned a cool library. I can't remember the name of it. Maybe we'll think of it later. And by this guy, Frank Krueger?
Krueger, maybe.
Anyway, Jimmy Scott commented on the show, and he said, "Hey, get Frank on. That guy really knows his stuff."
Yeah.
Sorry, Jimmy, we don't do that.
No, we can't do that.
Yeah, we never
sorry.
do that. We're not going to do that.
We're never going to have Frank on.
No, we're not that guy.
Nope.
Yeah, we don't work that way.
Nope.
Sorry. Oh, well. But you know what? Send him a Music to Code By anyway. Sorry we couldn't help you out here, Jimmy, but a Music to Code By collection is on its way to you. And if you'd like to get the collection, write a comment on the website at .netrocks.com or via any of our social media, because we publish every show to Google Plus and Facebook. And if you comment there, and we read it on the show, we'll send you Music to Code By.
And definitely follow us on Twitter. He's at Rich Campbell. I'm at Carl Franklin. Please send us a tweet. Batch delete.
Love it.
Love it.
Oh, look, database humor. How quaint.
Sorry. All right, now let's get to the real stuff. Frank Krueger is here. He's been writing .NET apps in both C# and F# since 2004. Since 2008, he's been an independent mobile developer specializing in nerdy, sciencey apps. He's been writing open source libraries since that time and enjoys hanging out with the .NET community. And now he's even hanging out with us. Welcome, Frank.
Oh, thank you very much. It's been a real hope in my life to once be on the show, and it's finally happening. So I'm very excited.
Oh, that's great.
I appreciate a fellow podcaster coming on, and when we ask for a brief bio, does not mess around.
Nope.
3 sentences. Got it nailed. Like, love it. Read the fact, did all the things. Awesome.
You got to keep your narcissism in check, I find. I can really
now you're just talking crazy talk, Mr. Krueger. That is nuts. Me and my 6 mirrors disagree with you.
Well, if you want to read Frank's complete bio, you'll have to go to .netrocks.com and read it on our website. Or, you could just Google bang him or something.
One of those things.
What the heck are you doing with this Ooui thing anyway?
I think you have to write a web framework at some point in your life. If you're not,
that's what the grown-ups
really
do. Huh?
Yeah, it's so let's start there. You just have to do it.
Sure.
But the truth is, I actually had some scenarios. I was doing some IoT devices, and I came to the conclusion that I wanted to create web interfaces for them. At first, I was writing some mobile apps, and for every stupid little IoT device, or actually in my case, a lot of robots, actually, I was writing a little app to, get some numbers out of the robot, see what it's doing, see what it's thinking. And I was getting tired of keeping that mobile app in sync with the robot. So I just wanted to have the robot host its own UI or IoT device, whatever. Yeah. But I'm a mobile developer, and that meant I had to write a website. And I actually did used to be a web developer, so it's okay. But I wasn't looking forward to it.
Right. So you made this. You had this idea, and tell us how it all started.
So I had the idea of, I wish web development was just like native mobile development, basically WinForms, like old VB style. I wanted to,
Don't we all?
I just wanted to put my, exactly.
You kids get off my lawn.
I just wanted to say, hey, look, there's a view, there's a button, here's a click handler on the button. I'm going to change this number sometime. Don't ask. I'll change it later.
and I really appreciate you coming from a mobile perspective, right? Like that's your native development environment, that event interaction model, but with a fairly constrained UI space.
Yeah, I've been living this world for 8 years. It's what I know. Like I said, I was a web developer. I've written templates. I spent the 90s writing PHP templates and terrible.
So you do have some self-loathing too. I appreciate that.
Like we all do.
What I actually wanted was a level of interactivity that I just find a little cumbersome when you're doing normal web programming. And that's just, like I said, it's the button handlers. You have to write a push callback, and you decouple your views, so you regenerate the view every time. You're in a templating language. I don't want that. I just want to say, button, your text is this is your color, this is that, and move on with my life.
Nice.
And so I wrote Ooui, the library, to make that happen in .NET.
And why OOUI?
Object-oriented UI.
Brilliant.
Okay, so it started with
accurate. It's a pun. It's in another language. It's genius.
Thank you. I was very proud of myself. Let the narcissism flow.
Well, at least you didn't pronounce it ooey. That'd be a little weird.
I think the style guide does state that's the correct pronunciation. You have to put a ooh at the beginning. Yeah.
Okay.
In practice, I just say we.
Ooh-wee.
When Laurent mentioned it, of course, I immediately went there because he was struggling with the pronunciation as well. And I appreciate that right in the notes was, here's the correct pronunciation. But it always astonishes me when there's these remarkably clever projects and we don't know. It's like, it's hard to keep up. How long have you been working on this?
A little while, to be honest. It was more of a brainchild in my head for a long time. I tend to think about things for a very long time before I can actually get them down into code. And I wrote a few different versions of this, to be honest. I wrote a version in Python. I wrote a version in C++. And
wow.
So can we back up and talk just a little bit about, the big picture of Ooui, the Ooui web framework? You said it's a cross-platform UI library that uses web technologies, but give us a little more about what it does.
Yeah, so let's start with, it's just a .NET standard library. So you can bring this into literally any project, and it's just going to run anywhere. And what is it? It's an API that mimics the HTML DOM that you would normally get if you were a JavaScript programmer writing JavaScript in the browser. So you have things like div elements and input elements. These are all classes in the library.
Okay.
And the kind of innovation, the simplicity that I brought here is you can take any of those UI elements, button, input. I just keep going back to those. They're all you need to write an app.
Yeah. It's right.
Yeah. And here's the funny part, though. You can take any one of those and just say, serve this at this URL. And now it becomes a little web server. This library, this little .NET Standard library built into .NET Standard is actually a full web server, HTTP listener. And so it can take advantage of that. And that's nice for my little IoT scenario where I'm running all the robot's logic, but I also want a little web server that's, showing all the data on the robot. Well, it's best to just put that all into the same program.
And so you run the web server on the client as well?
Yeah, totes.
Okay.
But you can imagine, you can run Kestrel also.
Right.
So I have the built-in web server, but you can run Kestrel. And I wrote an ASP.NET Core binding, so you can run this in IIS up in Azure. And that's actually how I recommend people do it. I wrote that little web server for myself mostly, but a real website should run proper IIS or whatever.
And so these objects are then C# objects?
Mm-hmm. Nice, simple little data objects. Very plain. They have event handlers, exactly how you would expect them to have. Button has a click handler. All the text boxes have input and change handlers, that kind of stuff. I was honestly going for Visual Basic 3 here. I just wanted the simplicity of that API.
And you can run on top of WebAssembly, and you've got a forms thing, and all these other stuff. Does Blazor come into play anywhere?
Oh, yeah, that's a whole crazy topic.
Yeah.
So we'll have to rewind a moment to actually understand what's going on with the WebAssembly and Blazor stuff.
Okay.
The whole kind of trick with this library is that it's constantly manipulating the DOM on the client. So it's doing minimal updates. You're not refreshing the whole page. When you say label text equals foo, that's going to happen kind of instantaneously. And that's all done over WebSockets.
Okay.
So this library, in a lot of ways, is like web forms. You guys were web forms programmers, right?
Yeah, sure. Absolutely.
Yeah. So I kind of think of this as web forms 2.0, maybe done right.
So you program it on the server, and when you make these, you just say, update this with that. All of that gets translated through WebSockets into an asynchronous call that does the updating.
Exactly. So now you don't have to.
Holy crap.
It's not so bad. SignalR does this. It's
easy. Sure, but you don't have to write all the plumbing. It just happens.
Well, that was actually what is really the Wii library, is this synchronization protocol that I developed. Writing mobile apps, you feel like half your life is synchronizing data with foreign sources. And so I was honestly getting tired of writing that code, so I wanted a sync solution I just wanted a sync solution that works simply. This is my whole MO, is I just want simplicity. And so I just decided to wrap the scary parts of synchronization under a friendly, happy API. And that API I happen to choose to be the web DOM, but it could be anything else.
Wow.
So there's this synchronization library, and that's what's working over the WebSocket to keep the server model in sync with the UI.
Oh my God. If you guys can just go ahead and talk, I'm going to download this and run it in Visual Studio right now. Just go ahead, talk amongst yourselves.
There's something a little inception-y about this whole, is it a browser? Is it a web server?
You have no idea. Okay, but now we can talk about the WebAssembly part, because it's actually quite independent from everything I've just talked about. But we can start with my original goal was to make programming the web feel like you were just programming within the browser.
Right.
And so it makes sense. Well, if you can run .NET code in the browser, this seems like a pretty good fit. And And so the moment I saw Miguel and company, Rodrigo Cumpera is the Mono developer, really leading the charge and making WebAssembly happen.
Right.
I just want to make it clear I'm building on the shoulder of giants here.
Of course.
No, those guys are so crazy smart. It's terrifying.
Yeah, I was actually just listening to your Blazor episode, I think maybe even the second one, and they were giving all the shout outs, and you just can't do it enough. It's crazy what the Mono people are pulling off.
Yep.
Well, it transformed Blazor, right? I mean, Steve Sanderson was doing his own little odd thing that the rest of us, our heads were exploding when he spoke. Then suddenly Miguel and Rodrigo jump on board and go, hey, what if we... And it just transformed the project. You couldn't ignore it after that.
Yeah.
Yeah, and there's actually there's a secondary benefit here is that they're working very hard on the mono interpreter, which is going to give all sorts of benefits to the iOS side, my world on the mobile. We'll be able to run like Python code, proper dynamic code and all that stuff. Wow. So it's going to be really exciting actually for all this work to bubble up completely.
Wow. How does this lead to Python? Walk me through this. That's why I find this fascinating. Yeah.
Okay. So I think they mentioned that there's two ways you could get .NET running in WebAssembly. The first is kind of what you would guess is the AOT, the ahead of time compilation.
Right.
And this is how we get Xamarin working on iOS that doesn't allow jitting. iOS doesn't, just flat out can't do it.
Yeah, it can't do it.
Yeah. So we have to compile everything to native code on the computer, and then that's that. The same thing can be applied to WebAssembly. We can recompile our entire app down to WebAssembly bytecode. It's its own VM. It's its own bytecode.
Right.
And that work is actually being worked upon right now. It's not as far as long as the alternative approach, which is using the interpreter. And that's what they described, where they just got the mono runtime compiled to WebAssembly, and then they put the runtime into interpreter mode, and that allows it to just consume any old DLL you throw at it and just start running that code.
Nice.
Okay.
So now to iOS and Python. Python relies on the DLR, the dynamic runtime parts of the CLR.
So you're talking about Iron Python?
Yes, sorry, Iron Python. Yep. Mm-hmm. And all the others. There's other Iron ones too.
Sure, Iron Ruby.
Iron Ruby, yeah.
Thank you.
The poor old DLR never got as much love it deserved.
But it was always awesome, and we always appreciated it.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I'm a polyglot. I love multiple programming languages. Sure. And that's actually what brought me to the CLR in the first place, is the idea that all these languages could mix together. Yeah. So I have no problem with that. Okay, but the limitation in Xamarin iOS has always been reflection emit does not work.
Okay.
It just throws an exception, not allowed to do it. Again, this comes back to we're not allowed to JIT code. We're not allowed to dynamically execute code. Mm-hmm. That said, you are allowed to interpret code.
Right.
And so all this work in getting the interpreter powerful enough to run WebAssembly is going to be turned toward iOS. So they'll be able to, when you reflection emit, run with the interpreter so that all that stuff works again. And it turns out, oddly enough, the interpreter is stupid fast. And it can actually outperform some things that they're actually compiling down right now into native code. It can outperform them. Weird things like virtual template methods and stuff, crazy stuff in .NET, the edge cases. But the interpreter can actually plow through that stuff very quickly.
That's interesting.
Yeah, it is.
Mm-hmm.
And really sort of a cool place to live in. And I've added links to Iron Python and Iron Ruby. And it's so exciting to see Iron Python literally got at implementation 2.78 in February of this year. But poor old Iron Ruby hasn't updated since 2011.
Ouch. Yeah, I wasn't actually sure the status of much of them.
Well, it's got a website, but yeah, it's got to be tough to live in an edge case like this.
Hey, guys, hang on just for a second while we take a moment for this very important message. Hey, guess what, Rockheads? Progress Telerik wants to send someone to build. So they're having a contest. Step 1 is to sign up and learn about the new innovative modern UI tools they'll be announcing at Build. By registering, you'll be entered to win a full conference pass to Microsoft Build, plus a $500 travel stipend. They're also giving away 3 Telerik DevCraft UI licenses. And for .NET Rocks listeners, they'll also be giving away a Telerik DevCraft UI license every week. All you have to do is register at buildcontest.pwop.me. That's buildcontest.pwop.me. Progress offers the leading platform for developing and deploying mission-critical business applications. The creator of the award-winning Telerik, .NET, and Kendo UI, JavaScript user interface components and controls, reporting solutions, and productivity tools, Progress offers all the tools developers need to build high-performant, modern apps with outstanding UI. Go now to buildcontest.pwop.me and sign up to win. All right, and we're back. .NET Rocks. I'm Carl Franklin. He's Richard Campbell, and he is Frank Krueger, the inventor and maker of Ooui, which is blowing our minds at the moment. Can you tell us, how does this actually work? Like, how do we get started? Would I make an HTML page and then, make a button with an ID and then go over to my C# code and then get some event handlers going? How exactly do I make this work?
Yeah, in fact, you don't do any of that. It's quite different.
All right.
So imagine you were an empty JavaScript file with an empty DOM, and you got to create the UI from scratch. So
I hate that.
Oh, yeah. So if I want a heading, I got to create a new heading element, create a new paragraph element, add a div, add children to that. This is all done in code through an object model. I thought that was fantastic. I like that way of programming. I like that level of control, especially when you couple it with CSS. You can pull off some really fancy stuff in HTML. But it turns out I'm told I'm weird, and other people don't like that.
So you build the UI with an object model, just like if you were going to go into Zamel or something and create things and put them all together, or even Xamarin-forms does that, right? You can.
Yeah, and it's a very safe object model. It's not coupled to any user framework or anything like that. You can serialize it to JSON and pull it back out. It's oddly enough, you could use JSON as your HTML format. Okay. That sounds terrible, but you shouldn't do it. You shouldn't do any of that.
I agree.
So instead, what I did was I put Xamarin-forms as another front end, as a layer on top of the Ooui library, so that you can program Xamarin-forms apps, which include XAML for doing your user interface layout and data binding and all sorts of clever layouts and controls and all that. And you can write Xamarin-forms apps and have those run on Ooui. And you get all the same benefits of Ooui that I was talking about before.
But the Xamarin-forms UI is in a browser?
At this point, we're still talking about it's funny because this library has a split personality.
Yeah,
you can
so
run
do
it in
I
two
right now.
modes. Yeah, sorry. So let me clarify. There's two ways to run Ooui. We can run on the server, or we can run directly in the browser. Two different places.
Okay.
But it kind of abstracts all that from you. You don't make that decision. You just write against its API, and then at some point you decide where to put that UI. Am I going to put it on the server, or am I going to put it on the client? The library doesn't really care. It abstracts that from you. So you get to make that decision. And the neat thing is you can run this on the server with Xamarin-forms. And so I actually have a little sample app out there, a little chat client called WeChat with the source code out there. And you can go see it. It's running on Azure in ASP.NET and IIS. And it's just serving away using Xamarin-forms. And so you can see all that code. I'm pretty proud of that, running a backend for forms.
And that's live. That's running right now.
That's live.
You can play with it.
Yeah. We can go chat on there. It's got a few bugs, but I'm going to be working on it and improving it. It's actually a really great test case to make sure the code is robust.
Well, it's almost a cliche test case, exactly. It's like everybody's familiar with this. It's a harder problem than it ever looks like, so it's not a bad chance to test at all.
Yeah, and I actually did a Twitter poll because I think the collaborative app space is where this library can really show off, where it makes it really kind of trivial to write these kinds of apps. And so I asked people, what would be a better demo, a chat app or an MMORPG, like a rogue-style game? And I was so excited to write this rogue-style game, and everyone voted for the chat app. So.
I love it.
It's like, you're killing me, people. Come on. Yeah. I really wanted to write this game.
All right. So your Xamarin-forms samples actually do run in the browser, but all the underlying code is Xamarin-forms.
In the case of WeChat there, that's actually running on the server. So that's all on the server. So now we can talk about the WebAssembly part.
All right. Okay.
Yeah. So if you want it to run in the browser, it can support that mode too. And this is where it's very much like Blazor. Blazor you can think of as a UI framework that runs on mono WebAssembly.
Sure.
Ooui is also a UI framework that can run on mono WebAssembly.
Right.
So they're kind of two different libraries tackling the same problem. How do I write a proper app in this world? I don't know how much you've looked into WebAssembly, but those apps that run under that are actually quite separate from the JavaScript DOM world. It's not quite a sandbox, but it almost is. And so if you were to just take the mono WebAssembly stuff right now, you could print stuff to the console, but it's a little hard to do any UI stuff. And so you have projects like Blazor and Ooui trying to provide that UI layer for you in the browser.
My brain hurts. I just edited XAML and saw in the browser and saw the result on the other side of the page. Dude, yeah. Can I talk about this? This one's trippy. Talk about Inception here.
Yeah, no, we're all tripping.
Okay, this one's fun. So one of my old Wii samples was I just made the most basic Zamel editor. Shows you the code on the left and runs the Zamel and shows it to you on the right. This is actually a very easy trick to pull off in Xamarin-forms. You can see the code for it. It's stupid simple.
Right.
So when it came time to get this to run in the browser, I was like, well, I have to do something Inception-y. I love jokes. I love jokes that only I get. I mean, it's so Inception-y, the fact that we have .NET running in the browser. I have to add a UI layer level of Inception. Right. So I said, this is the demo I'm going to publish. So yeah, you can go see a XAML editor running in WebAssembly, hosted on Amazon S3. And I hosted it on Amazon S3 because I wanted to make the point that there's no intelligent server running here. All the logic is running in the browser. No APIs. Yeah,
it's just nothing. A blob.
That is so...
It's just an HTML file. It's so weird.
Right? This isn't real. Oh, wait. I'm going to hurt myself and say, click on view source.
Yeah, that hurts.
You're not going to like it. No. It's weird.
No, I bet I won't. But there's nothing. Yes, there's nothing in here. Of course, it's WebAssembly, right? So all is text/JavaScript var assemblies equal C# security mcore lib JSON Ooui forms. Yeah, just like we've learned with Blazor. This is no code to observe, which is a whole other conversation. Yeah, but it's really interesting.
And this is actually another place where the library has its schism. If I was running this on the server, you can run the same exact sample on the server. It's really up to you where you run it. It would pre-render the HTML for you. And so when you did view source, you would actually see the HTML. And I do that very specifically to support Google and people scraping your website. Right. Because there's really no point in having a website unless you're accessible to search engines.
Unless you're indexable, right?
Wow. Exactly. And that's always a failing point of these kinds of libraries is you just become, you're blank to the world. And it's a problem with WebAssembly. Maybe, I just don't anticipate the crawlers ever getting that sophisticated. They're just going to stick to HTML.
We've always been talking about this tech in the context of enterprise internal apps anyway, where you don't care if they're indexed. This is just not a good approach for the public internet for the SEO reason alone.
Right. Yep. When I design things, I do like to try to keep the public internet in mind. If you can't go web scale, then don't bother. Otherwise it's just a toy. And while it started as a toy, I don't want it to be a toy.
Well, I vowed when I started .NET Rocks in 2002, yes, I know, that I would never read code on the show. And pretty much I've kept my promise, haven't I, Richard?
More or less. There are moments.
This is one of those moments. I have to, because it's only a couple of lines of code. So this is in a static void main, and it's just in an app. It's just in a little app. Var button equals new button, parent, quote, click me, semicolon, right? Yeah. And then you have a button click event, so plus equals with parent s comma e, lambda count plus plus, which you've got a variable, a counter. Button text equals, dollar sign, clicked count times. Easy. And then you publish it. And the comment says, publishing makes an object available at a given URL. The user should be directed to localhost :800 /shared -button. And you basically have a line of code that says UI.publish, quote, /shared -button, quote, comma, button, end paren. You're done.
I like simplicity.
And that's it. That's ridiculous.
Well, let me tell you another use case of why I made sure it was that simple. I found myself writing a lot of console apps, read some files, spit some stuff out.
Yep.
And it's frustrating because I never build UIs for them. And I think back in the day when we had WinForms and I was a Windows developer, I built UIs for every stupid little tool I built because that was smart. You just VB, new project, here's what you got to do. Yeah, console apps were for the 70s, we've moved past them. And what I found was I didn't write UIs for these stupid little tools because all the UI frameworks were complex. And I just didn't want to deal with them. And they had someone run on this platform, someone run on that platform. It's just so much to think about.
Yeah.
And so what I wanted was, for all those stupid little scripts that I write, I want a super simple UI framework to work with them.
Yeah.
And so I made it as simple as create a new button and publish it. Done. There's your UI. Have fun.
Well, hey, Richard.
Yeah, buddy.
Guess what time it is now?
It must be that happy time again.
Time to poke a hole in my head and let some of the pressure out. Jeez. Whew. All right, I got to take a moment here. It's just, it's actually time to give away a D-Experience subscription from our friends at DevExpress to one lucky member of the .NET Rocks fan club. Everybody knows that DevExpress has great desktop controls and tools, but their web tools are simply amazing. They have this collection of HTML5 JavaScript controls called DevExtreme. And now at the heart of the product line are these really big, powerful controls like grid, chart, pivot grid, tree list, and scheduler. But DevExtreme also comes with more than 50 touch-optimized client-side controls. Data visualizers, navigators, editors, lists, dialogues, and notification controls, and general-purpose controls like a filter builder, range slider, file uploader, scroll view, and more. Since they're all JavaScript, HTML, CSS, they include integrations with things like jQuery, Knockout, React, Ionic, and Angular. Plus, DevExtreme controls come with ASP.NET MVC and ASP.NET Core wrappers, so they're infinitely flexible. But don't take our word for it. Go for a test drive at dx.dotnetrocks.com. That's dx.dotnetrocks.com.
All right, buddy. Who's our winner?
Today's winner, Richard, is Chris Johnson from Kirkland, Washington.
Oh, congratulations, Chris Johnson.
Yes.
Golf clap for you.
Golf clap for Chris, who just won the D-Experience subscription, a big pile of awesome from our friends at DevExpress, just for being a member of the .NET Rocks fan club. And you can join the .NET Rocks fan club. All you have to do is go to .NETRocks.com, click on the big Get Free Stuff button, answer a few questions, and join the club. We have thousands of members all over the world. In every show, we like to give away stuff from our sponsors. And every December, we give away a $5,000 technology shopping spree to one lucky member of said fan club. But you have to sign up to win. And we'd like to ask our guests, Frank, if you had $5,000 to spend on technology today, what would you buy?
Well, I take my podcasting duties very seriously.
Yes.
And so I spent all morning on Amazon shopping.
I might be you, actually.
So I have a list. No, I'm just kidding. I actually do have something that I've always wanted, and that is a new, beautiful, fast digital oscilloscope. And I want one with a logic analyzer. I want automatic serial protocol analysis. I want a touch screen. I want a glorious, beautiful digital oscilloscope. That's it.
For what? What do you need digital analysis for?
Oh, I'm always making up my own little serial protocols to talk between devices to build like little mesh networks. And, honestly, to just be cheap. You just save an IO pin if you make your own serial protocol. So you just, and you can do that with an oscilloscope. I have one literally from the 1950s, and I can technically find that waveform on it, but it's such a pain in the butt.
That's nerdy and sciencey.
Yeah.
I had an HP analog oscilloscope rack mount that went into my rack closet that I used for dealing with interaction problems I had between my generator and my UPSs, where we proved a 7th and 9th harmonic were disturbing the UPS. This is not a normal conversation.
Wow, that is super
Blew
nerdy.
up my electrician's mind, and my explanation was complicated enough that the UPS company, I believe it was Minuteman, once I explained what was going on, said, "If I just take back the UPSs, will you stop talking?"
Awesome.
Well, I didn't know these nice oscilloscopes existed until a couple of years ago. I was working in a lab, and they had just this gorgeous, gorgeous oscilloscope, and I just fell in love with it. And
I got to presume a Tektronix, because they're like the Cadillac.
Oh, I wish I had taken a picture of it, but I wasn't allowed a camera, so I don't even know its brand or anything. That might have been what I was doing on Amazon this morning, too.
There you go. Because you could spend serious coin on a Tektronix oscilloscope. Like, they make $40,000 versions, right?
I'm sure. And the add-ons, like I was looking at a particular scope for this, and then you do this upgrade, that upgrade, that upgrade. It is, those, like you said, a Cadillac. Yeah.
Yeah, no, you can go as mental as you want, because the basic ones are a few $100s.
Yeah.
But yeah, as soon as you start taking multiple signals at higher frequencies, like if you want to handle gigahertz frequencies going into a digital oscilloscope, dude, that's $5,000 easy. Like,
the only reason people are still listening is because they want to hear more about Ooui.
Okay. It's got a touch screen. It's awesome.
But touch screens.
Everybody else is like, what the heck?
Hardware
what happens
geeks.
when you invite me on.
Yeah.
Well, you
Hardware
two together,
geeks.
man.
Yeah, no, it's a nasty feedback loop, actually.
Yeah.
I retired my old oscilloscope at some point when we were doing an electronic haul out, which happens on a regular basis around here. It's like, okay, let it go. We solved the waveform problem, and we don't need it here anymore. I don't miss it. I really don't miss it. Honest, I don't miss it. I miss you. Wait.
Beautiful tools. They're great.
Yep. Great. Blinky lights, man. Good blinky lights. That's what it's all about.
So getting back to Zamel and all of the UI syntaxes you support, you're not even at that level. You have this abstraction layer that is these objects that can just sit on top of just about anything. And does that a big problem for you in terms of keeping up with the project as more versions of Zamel come out and the Zamel standard happens? Is that going to be a challenge when things change?
I got pretty lucky here. The Xamarin-forms is open source. You can go see exactly how it works. And it's really well architected, where they only ask of and I should say these are called backends for Xamarin-forms. So iOS would be a backend, Android would be a backend, UWP, I think even WPF, GDK, these are all backends for Xamarin-forms. So Ooui is just another backend for it. And they architected it very well. The biggest problem is for every control in Xamarin-forms, I have to have an equivalent control.
Right.
Yeah. In a few cases, I mean, like I said, most apps are text boxes and buttons. The rest is just layout and images and colors. It's fine. Right. But the other big one was like a toggle switch. And, that's just not native to HTML. There's no built-in control that looks like a toggle switch. They have check boxes.
Got to do some CSS there.
Mm-hmm. And actually, the cool thing is, though, that Ooui is so good at manipulating the DOM and working with objects. I just wrote my own toggle control, which was as simple as create a big green box, create a gray box inside of it, and move that gray box around whenever they toggle it.
Wow.
It's like 10 lines of code.
So writing controls in Ooui to use in Ooui.
In Xamarin-forms. Just to keep you on your toes.
Well, and I got to tell you, I was bombing through docs on some of the Xamarin-forms stuff, cutting and pasting chunks of XAML, dropping it in your prototype Zamel Editor, and it's just rendering,
Oh, and that one's even a little old. I got to update that one. I've made a bunch of new improvements. So there is actually a new big push in Xamarin-forms to add a lot of missing features, just a lot of little things like setting the fonts on every control, setting the text color everywhere.
Right.
So as those things get added, yes, it's kind of a pain, but I have to add them also.
Right.
We keep a doc. It's, it's a pain, but at the same time, it's simple. It's, for every one of those, I need one of these. And so it's very easy to keep track of and to just maintain.
As someone working on essentially their own implementation of XAML, where are you on the whole XAML standard thing? Like, is this something that you care about?
No.
Wow, what a great answer. Man, you nailed it right there.
I don't know who I'm offending with every next word that's about to come out of my mouth, so I apologize to everyone. Let's start there. I actually never did too much XAML programming in my career, so it was never baked into my blood. Xamarin-forms lack some obvious things like gradients and a few other things. Some names are wrong, and so the standard was to merge all this stuff. But the truth is, I think for myself, I've basically just standardized on Xamarin-forms XAML, and I just don't deal with the Windows XAMLs. It's sad. I'm sorry. It's a terrible answer.
I don't
but for
think
me,
you should be that upset about that.
No, I don't think so either.
Because there's more mobile activity going on than there is desktop activity. One of the concerns I've had about XAML standard, and I'm pretty sure we talked to Miguel about this exactly, was, look, you've got two flavors of XAML living inside of the desktop in the form of WPF and XAML for Windows. Then you've got this, and they're not the same, but they're pretty darn similar.
And UWP is also a distinct implementation as far as I understand it.
Yeah. And then you have Xamarin-forms way over here that is XAML-ish, but comes at it from a mobile perspective, which is naturally simpler and narrower and, solving a different scope of problem. And one would argue the more important problem.
But also you have an open source project here, right? And when XAML standard comes around, there will be people that will pick it up and and help with that.
Right. And in fact, I don't know, this is no insider knowledge or anything I'm about to say. But at some point, I hope that Xamarin would want to take in a web version of Xamarin-forms. I think there's an excellent use case for it.
Sure.
And if they ever do decide to do that, I hope they'll just steal my implementation and then I'll shut mine down and use theirs, because I'm
code.
Yeah, I'm more than happy to have other people maintain this. I'm not that precious.
You
also get back to this idea of I want this to exist and I almost don't care how.
Yeah, exactly. I want that technology.
Right.
And then I gotta state the elephant in the room, or at least it's always there for me. Silverlight.
Oh, don't say the S word.
I'm going there. I'm just doing it because no one wants me to, and I'm doing it. I liked Silverlight. I liked programming it. It was good. That was actually my exposure to XAML.
Sure.
And
so did I.
We takes the approach of taking Xamarin-forms and making it run in HTML, but there's absolutely nothing stopping me from taking Silverlight and making that run in the browser with WebAssembly and all that. And so, honestly, I'm just waiting for someone to take the mono WebAssembly work and build a Silverlight out of it. I don't know if that's a regression. I don't know if that'll set the community back rather than forward, but it just feels such a natural fit. And maybe I should stop talking about it now.
Well, I just don't think you're alone, right? That there are folks that have fond memories of that felt very productive in it, and maybe we can put these ingredients together.
But certainly that's where Blazor's going to help,
Well, Blazor, Blazor is a templating engine. It's very much the React component style. So you are writing HTML templates, and you are technically kind of regenerating the UI every time, but they're smarter about that. They're good people. It's a templating style programming. It's not your button click handler style programming.
So Xamarin-forms in the browser is more like what Silverlight is or was.
Exactly. Yeah, they're much more similar to each other. Blazor is like an amazing version of React running in the browser. And the React programming model is awesome. Yeah.
Well, and Razor as a rendering approach is just a different way of thinking than Xamarin-forms.
Exactly. It's Yeah, it's declarative versus constructionist. Yeah. I mean, yeah, the truth is you can write any app in any style. So it's what is your preference? I started by saying I'm a mobile developer and I have certain expectations from the UI. I don't want to write PHP code in 2018.
No, and I really appreciate, you laying that out there right up front. It's just like, look, this is how I see the world. These are the things I look for. I love an opinionated library where it's like, I have a belief system. I'm not trying to be all things to all people. If you don't believe in these things, I'm not your guy.
You have to be an open source. Otherwise, the project gets dragged in every direction.
Exactly.
I've done that to myself with so many projects where at first I solve my own problem. That's great. And then it solves a few other people's problems. And then the hubris emerges and you're like, I can solve everyone's problem. And that's where you fail.
Yeah. But oddly enough, does not go well.
No. So I've taken to writing what I consider, small. I never used the word opinionated before, but I might as well. Yeah, opinionated. That said, I do hope that we becomes popular because I do think its programming model is very pleasant and enjoyable to use. And the fact that you have so many deployment options just makes it so much easier.
Well, and I appreciate that was the point, right? That you're trying to go to this pleasant approach to this. Because lots of folks don't feel that way about XAML-ish languages, that this is a necessary evil, not a happy place.
I've always been inspired by this one Ruby user interface library called Shoes. And I think that they hit this very sweet spot of a very simple declarative UI that you could create in code and a simplicity of actually executing that UI. It just worked everywhere. And I feel like in some ways I'm always trying to strive to recreate that same framework in .NET to have those same awesome features. Learn from others, steal.
There's a love affair that comes with Ruby, that the people who learn to develop in that space, you always see that same reaction that they're sort of, it was so fun. The time that I was doing that, I got very excited and engaged on it. And then, then reality got in the way. Like there were other things I had to do.
Yeah, it's a passionate community that's built some amazing software, and we can all learn a lot from what they've done.
Not that it's particularly relevant to the .NET community, but like I'm going to include a link to Shoes. Like you really should look at this.
Yeah, okay.
It's
Have you seen it before?
Absolutely. As soon as you said it, I'm like, oh, I remember that. Like it's just one of those things where you look at this code and you look at the rendering and you're like, why haven't we always done this? It's just it's one of those things. It is exactly the way you would describe a UI on paper without drawing a picture.
I've taken some attempts at actually trying to implement Shoes in .NET. I could just never get the syntax quite exactly right. Plus, I think being true to the web was also important in my design of Ooui. I wanted to expose all of CSS to you. There are no limits. You can create any element. You can call any function. It does all the serialization and all the marshaling of data back and forth. It handles all that nastiness for you. So you can just write the stupid code and get your job done.
I love that.
For me, my example was always, I want strip charts scrolling. I want an oscilloscope in my app. So I want.
It's so great it's so great that you have that project and that impossible thing in mind that you need to achieve. Because if you can do that, dude, you can do anything. All right.
That's it. Yeah. It's software. I think that's one thing my electronics background has actually given me as a perspective that this is software. You can do anything. You can break every rule. You can it doesn't matter, people. Like as long as there aren't any bugs in it. Yeah. I mean, you have to have some of that enthusiasm.
Yeah. I think once you hang out in hardware, now you know what's hard.
Yeah.
And so all these software problems, you're like, dude, that's not that hard. Let me show you a hard problem. I'm having a frequency loopback on this particular chunk of the circuit that's disturbing data storage entirely.
Yeah.
And near as I can tell, I'm going to need a 3-inch by 3-inch piece of tinfoil wrapped over the right piece, and everything will just work. I just don't know which piece of tinfoil to put on.
Hat shaped.
And as you know, once you have a serial protocol, once you can move data from one device to another, all bets are off. You can conquer the world.
Yeah.
And that was actually the abstraction that worked very well in Wii, because it was going over WebSockets in the first version, where it was running on the server, communicating with the browser over WebSockets. It always had to have that communications channel. And so when it came time to put it into WebAssembly, and you had to marshal objects back and forth between the DOM and the WebAssembly world, which is running in its own memory space and is all crazy, I already had all that serialization code.
Did you use SignalR or did you write your own over WebSockets?
Did my own over WebSockets.
What?
WebSockets are
Dude,
easy.
You are
it's a high level. I'm an old Unix network guy.
Oh my
WebSockets,
God.
they're trivial.
Wow.
Give me a break.
All right, now I'm completely blown away.
Oh, come on.
Oh, man, that's awesome. I mean, I've done sockets. I know, I've done sockets myself, but I've seen the WebSockets API. It's gnarly. It's really hairy. It's got warts, man.
Yeah, and actually, I got a little sad because I wanted to run Wii on iOS itself. You know, me and Inception, right? We just got to keep taking it deeper and deeper. And so I wanted to run Xamarin-forms in a browser on iOS just to mess around. But unfortunately, the iOS version didn't support WebSockets. And so I couldn't do it with the traditional path. But it's nice. It's an abstract class. I can change out that communication transport, and I'll have this puppy running on iOS. I just love these mashups.
Oh, my God. Amazing. Is there anything else like any other tools that you're holding back on? I feel like I'm completely blown away now. What's next?
Oh, what's next? Oh, golly. Well, I was actually just listening to, I think it was your concurrency episode, but you were talking about F# and immutable objects and all of that stuff. And so there's some work being done in the Xamarin-forms space, especially by Don Syme, the creator of F#.
Yeah.
He's working on some really cool immutable functional styles of ways of building user interfaces using Xamarin-forms.
Wow.
And the benefits, you've heard it a million times, all the benefits of immutability. It's multi-threaded, all that stuff. Yeah. So getting that to work with Xamarin-forms is going to be especially cool. And of course, I'll get that to work with Wii. So you'll be able to do immutable UIs in a very functional style with all this stuff. But that's a little bit nerdy.
Well, there's a whole contingent of listeners out there who are jumping up and down going, yes,
okay, good.
right now.
And
so.
I think you sort of said off the side there's something that I don't think a lot of people are aware of, which is that Don Syme, the father of F#, is working closely with the Xamarin team these days.
Yeah.
That he's sort of made a lateral move in some respects.
It's super exciting. He's just focused on making sure that the functional .NET world is good to go on mobile. And my last large iOS app is Continuous. It's an IDE. It's a .NET IDE that runs on the iPad. And I wrote the whole thing, every line in F#. Wow. And I'm very proud of it because it's a very large, it's a full IDE. I tried to put Visual Studio onto the iPad, and it's all in F# in a functional style.
Jeez. Hey, I'm serious. Yeah. When do you have time to do all these things? Oh, you're young.
Did you know I implemented? I'm not that young, man. I'm getting old.
Okay.
I had to implement my own little CLR for that app. And that's also why I'm excited for the interpreter, for the Monos interpreter to get powerful again, because I'll be able to tear out whole chunks of code in that app and replace them with the Mono implementation. So I'm actually very excited about that.
Wow.
Yeah, I do think it's an important aspect of this is sort of getting rid of as much of your unique code as possible, trying to run them all in the same place.
Yes.
Yeah.
This is the conversation we had earlier in the week with Rocky Lotka around Blazor and the WASM parts. It's like, does it make sense to continue using Mono because it compiles the C, which goes down through LLVM and into WASM very easily, as opposed to the .NET Core, which is really built in C#, and how would you back that into WASM?
Yeah, Mono's lucky in that they have all this experience running on very constrained environments.
Yeah,
They've just been doing this for longer. .NET Core will catch up, obviously, but right now Mono's just has the advantage and all the, honestly, enthusiasm, because there's only so much people can do, but an open source community is so large that you can contribute to it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
The challenge to me is the fragmentation of .NET and not being confident that your code that you're running over here is now going to run the same way over there. I mean, standard is supposed to address that, but I just don't know if we're all the way there yet. You know, Rocky was talking specifically about these edge cases where it's like this behaves differently.
Yeah, personally, I feel like we're in the best place we've ever been in .NET, though, to be honest. I've been doing this game for a little while now, and we've had some terrible spots with the PCL fiasco, the Silverlight, you know, all the libraries custom to that, and WinRT did a job on us all, too.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
All that. So I feel like... So we've simplified the package world with this .NET standard, and the trade-off we made was, yes, it's going to throw platform not supported. And I think it's an okay trade-off because you should be testing your app on the platform and you should be catching that exception. So you'll realize it's not able to make that network request. This is exactly the problem I ran into when I tried to get Ooui running on iOS. WebSockets just flat out, the WebSocket server was not supported. And so it threw an exception. And that's that. And does that mean I hate .NET Standard and .NET Standard has failed? No, that's the trade-off we made so that we can greatly simplify the .NET ecosystem.
Yeah.
I do appreciate a coherent error message that you at least know why it's broken. It doesn't say object not found or go barf in some weird way. And you're trying to figure out, did I do something wrong? As opposed to not implemented. Well, I did nothing wrong. Then I'm trying to use something that isn't there. I know what's going on.
Sorry.
Yeah, the best error message ever. Sorry. The most Canadian error message ever. Sorry.
And to be honest, I'm a little jaded from the Python world because they'll just have bindings to executables built for an operating system written 20 years ago that's running on the wrong thing. And so they'll just fail left and right. So I'm like, well, at least we're still better than Python. That's terrible.
Don't be too upset. You could have been PHP, right?
I know everyone hates runtime errors. That's why we have a type system. That's why we do all this. But just for the community, just as a library developer, I feel so liberated to just create a .NET Standard library and say, good luck. I mean, chances are 99% of the time it's going to run fine. It's just the weird stuff.
Well, Frank, we're going to have to keep in touch and we'll be watching. And I've already downloaded it and I'm ready to check this out and take it for a spin. Looks great.
Exciting. And it is early days. I want to tell everyone that I'm still making it robust. So please check it out. Please file issues. If you do want it to go in a different direction, let me know. I'll probably say no, but I would love the feedback.
And your enthusiasm is infectious. Thank you.
Oh, great. And thank you for having me. I really appreciate it.
You bet. It's been a pleasure. And we'll see you next time on .NET Rocks. .NET Rocks is brought to you by Franklin's Net and produced by Pwop Studios, a full-service audio, video, and post-production facility located physically in New London, Connecticut, and of course in the cloud. Online at pwop.com. Visit our website at dotnetrocks.com for RSS feeds, downloads, mobile apps, comments, and access to the full archives going back to show number 1, recorded in September 2002. And make sure you check out our sponsors. They keep us in business. Now go write some code. See you next time.
Got transmitter banned by the FCC. Yes, I'm a